Hello students, and welcome to this presentation on cognitive psychology applied to studying. In this little presentation I will teach you a few techniques that we've learned through cognitive psychology that will help your memory as you study. So you'll be able to recall things better, you'll be able to pull things up when you're taking a test or when you're writing a paper or when you're discussing in a class. So these are different techniques that will work for everybody. These are techniques that have been studied in populations all over the world and also with different kind of learning disabilities as well. So if say you have ADHD or if you don't, these techniques apply to you. So let's start off with the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve is essentially how quickly we forget information. And so you see from this graph, this kind of research started in about 1885, and it continues to today to find the best way to keep us from forgetting information and to recall information. So you can see here that when we're starting, this is time along this line, this is the percent of material on this line. So let's say you've read your textbook, you've read your chapter for this week. 20 minutes after having finished reading that textbook, reading that chapter, you have forgotten about 40% of that material. So you're remembering now only about 58%. An hour after reading that textbook, you only remember about 44% of what you have read, what you've learned. About 9 hours later, 35. A day later, 33%. 2 days later, about 20% or 27%. 6 days later, about 25%. And then a month later, you only remember about 20% of what you studied. So we can be disheartened by this, and I often am when I see how quickly we forget material. But this graph also shows us something that is inspiring. It shows us that if we can remember things 1 or 2 days later, chances are we're going to continue remembering those things for the rest of the month, for the rest of the year, as far out as they have studied so far, which I believe is only up to 8 months to a year. So while we do forget things rather quickly, we do forget the material rather quickly, if we can hold on to it for 1 to 2 days or even a week, then we're going to remember that material really well for a long time. And that is inspiring to me, because then what we need to do is figure out how can we remember things, more things, for a day or 2 days after. And the way to do that is by repetition. So let's say again, you've read your chapter, you've taken notes on your chapter, which will help you remember even more than this 58%. So as you've read your chapter and taken notes, you come back a day later and you review your notes and you say, oh my goodness, I only remember about 33% of what I have read yesterday. But you review your notes and all of a sudden you have your graph starts off again. So we can look over here at this little graph. It's not a perfect representation, but it'll give you the idea. So this is the original forgetting curve, and this is day 1 after we read the chapter. So maybe you read it Sunday or Monday, you review it Tuesday, and look, you forget things slower and you remember more in the end. Maybe on day 3 or 4, you review the notes that you took on the chapter again, specifically going over those things that you forgot. And look, your forgetting curve is very slow, and you're going to remember more than 50%. And the same, the more times you review it, the better you'll remember it. So this is really applicable to you as you're studying for this course or other courses. We have the chapter reading and quiz assignments in the beginning of the week, and then we have the unit exam at the end of the week. So if you are reading the chapter on Monday or Tuesday or Sunday, it would be beneficial for you to take notes and then review those notes. And then if there's something you really don't remember at all from your notes, you can go back to the book. But stick with your notes and review your notes every 1 to 2 days, and you'll remember almost the entire material up to the exam time. So that's one technique that'll work for everybody. And now I'll talk more about studying specifically, the act of studying. When you're studying, you may feel like this man up here or this woman down here. Maybe you just have piles and piles of things to read, or maybe you have piles and piles of things to read, but you are just too tired to get to it. So I will give you some cycles that you can do for studying so that you can feel more like this guy. He looks like he's in control of his studying. So these study cycles have, like I said before, been studied in all different kinds of populations. So people with ADHD, these study cycles help them to remember, as well as people who don't have learning disabilities of any sort. These study cycles help them as well. So there are basically two study cycles, one for the most common things you'll find in studying, like taking and studying your notes, reading your textbook, memorizing facts, and there is another cycle for more high cognitive activity things, such as writing a paper or a report, and problem solving for maybe a research study you might be doing. So for studying notes, reading your textbook, and memorizing, the best cycle is 20 to 45 minutes of studying and then a 5 to 10 minute break. So if you study for 20 minutes, you would take a 5-minute break. If you study for 45 minutes, you would take a 10-minute break. If you're studying for 30 minutes, you might take 5 to 7-minute breaks. The point is, as you increase your time studying, you should increase your time of a break. And with these kinds of tasks, studying your notes or your textbook or memorizing, you don't want to go over this 45 minutes, otherwise you're going to forget more of the material. And this will also, it's also good to practice these different things. If you think you have maybe more distractions during your studying, or perhaps you have ADHD or something like that, you may want to start off with a 20-minute cycle and then a break for 5 minutes. If you're usually pretty good and you can power through your study session, you might want to start with a 45-minute session and a 10-minute break. And if those don't work for you, try some different times in the middle. For me, it works best to study for about 30 minutes and then take a break for 5 to 7. But everybody's a little bit different. That's why there's a range here. And remember, these are specific for things like studying notes, reading your textbook, or memorizing, kind of gathering the information kind of skills. For things like writing, applying your knowledge in writing reports or papers, that can be really difficult too. And there's a different study cycle for those kinds of tasks. For writing papers, problem solving, applying this knowledge that you have in your brain and solving problems with it, you need a completely different study cycle. And this one is pretty set. They've done a lot of research on this, and it's really quite set on being 50 minutes of study time and a 10-minute break. So if something is really challenging, if a paper is really challenging, if trying to solve a certain problem that you're doing in research or maybe a group project, powering through it for 50 minutes and then taking a 10-minute break is going to be your best bet in remembering that material, doing your best cognitively on that. And so those are the two study cycles. I'll flip through them again. So studying for notes, your textbook, memorizing things, you're going to want in between 20 and 45 minutes of study and a 5 to 10 minute break, depending on how long you've been studying. And for higher cognitive intensity activities like writing a paper, you're going to want to power at that for about 50 minutes and give yourself a 10-minute break. Now I want to make a note on these breaks. When you are doing, say, writing a paper or studying something, you want to take a break away from where you've been studying. If it's just the other room, if it's a few feet away, you need to be away from where you were just studying. Something that I'm sure happens quite often with online students, you do most of your work on the computer. And so when you have finished your work or when you want to take a break, you might just flip open a new window to Facebook or YouTube. I'm pretty guilty of that one, watching random YouTube videos that have no bearing on anything. But the research shows that when you do that, your brain doesn't really know that you've taken a break. You might be planning, okay, I'm on a break now, I'm going to open up Facebook, I'm going to open up YouTube and watch some mindless things. But since you're in the same environment, and since your body hasn't moved, your brain doesn't know that you've taken a break, and so your break is just going to be a waste of time. So if you're sitting at your computer, reading the material, watching this presentation on how to study well. When you take your break, you want to get up, move around, go get a drink of water from a drinking fountain, or go to the living room, grab a drink, maybe talk to somebody, make a phone call, do something completely different than what you were doing, and then come back and power through again. When you finish your studying for one subject, say you've been studying psychology and you've gone through 3 sessions. So you've been reading your textbook. You went 45 minutes, took a break. You went 45 minutes, took a break. Then it took you about 30 minutes, and now you're done with the reading for that week. The next thing you should be studying is something completely different than psychology. The more different you can get, the better. So if you studied psychology and then you have a class on mechanical engineering, that would be great, because it's going to be very different topics, and that way your brain won't get those topics confused, and it'll help you keep things straight. So I hope you can remember these things. I'll review them really quick. The forgetting curve, we forget a lot of things really quickly, but if we can remember them 1 to 2 days later, we're going to remember most of that material. So review your notes every day or 2 days, and then you'll be well prepared for the exams in any of your classes. Study cycles for reading notes or textbook or memorizing. The pretty normal study activities that you do, you want to go between 20 and 45 minutes and then take a 5 to 10 minute break. And for high cognitive intensity tasks like writing a paper, you want to go for 50 minutes of studying or writing time and a 10-minute break. So I hope this will be helpful to you. I hope you will apply this knowledge, because I do these things and it really helps, and it helps your study time go quicker. It helps you retain more information and will help you do better on exams. So next you'll learn about a few different things about memory that are maybe not as positive, maybe when memory fails us, but they're all very fascinating things. So get to that.